Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin. I'm president and CEO of Swiss America Trading. Almost forgot there for a moment. You're tuned into our podcast, The Secret War on Cash. I have with me my co host, Chris Agelastos, and we're looking at and talking about the last podcast and a little bit more today about what's going on in the economy, with largely having to do with debt and certainly the problems that we're having. As relates to our national debt and what's been happening with our treasuries and so forth. In addition to that, the effect that's having on financial markets, and specifically in this case, as we look at what's happening with gold and silver. So, Chris, good morning. Thanks for
Yeah.
being here as
Good morning.
usual. And let's get right into it. We looking here at our first article. This is out of Watcher Guru. Silver and gold. Silver and gold's surge as dollar weakness fuels precious metals rally. And I will say, in fact, in really, I think all the time we've been doing this podcast, which is probably close to 3 years now, um, this is the we've probably the most consistent coverage that we've seen on what's happening with the debt, the dollar, treasuries, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it it needs to happen. What's this? The discussions that they're having today needed to happen, but you wonder, is it kind of a little bit too little, too late? And you also wonder, like, where was all this reporting a year or two ago? When we had various countries that were unloading our treasuries, dumping our dollars. BRICS picking up momentum. Now all of a sudden, as we're reading all these reports that are coming out, Chris, this looks like the road to nowhere. Like this looks like we have got a problem here on our hands, and I don't know if there's a solution, a solution close at hand.
Yeah. Well, I would say the solution for our clients is making sure you hold and buy more gold and silver because
For
as
sure.
bad as this has been for treasuries and the U.S. dollar, it's been great for precious metals. We're right up at nearly $70 an ounce for silver again, and almost 4,700. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if in the next day or two we surpass the $4,700 mark for gold. So, and a weakening U.S. dollar is one of the major catalysts to pushing those prices upwards. And even though the Treasury is, we talked about in our last podcast, the Treasury is doing a lot of bond buybacks, and they're trying to ease long-term yields. This is all still pushing gold and silver prices higher. And you add to that the central bank buying that we've been talking about for the last couple of years. And you can see, that new highs are going to continue to be on the horizon. So it's been good for us. It's been good for my IRA. I love looking at seeing those numbers march forward. And as much as I wish that the government would manage our dollar responsibly, I'm glad at least that my retirement money can keep up and outpace that decline in the dollar with rising gold and silver prices.
No, you're absolutely right. And personally speaking, you kind of feel bad for people who are not properly or well diversified. We have the stock market at an all-time high. A lot of the people we
Hmm.
talk to, their stock portfolio does not reflect what you see, in the reporting with the S&P or the Dow. There's a
Yeah.
few strong sectors in the market, but a lot of sectors that have been really struggling.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's not like days of old where we had cost of living expenses and inflation so low that you didn't really need to have a ton of growth, and it may hurt you a little bit, but you'll get by. Now you can't, if without that counterbalance of some better or additional growth. It's eating literally right into their principal and
Yep.
aggressively eating into it like a termite on wood. So
Yeah.
that being said, let's kind of skip into here our next article, which is a very interesting one out of King World News. The US is now desperate to manipulate gold prices to 17 to $20,000 or higher. And this is interesting, and this has been talked about a lot over the course of time. That a big part of this, the United States and all the gold that we supposedly have in Fort Knox, according to Rand Paul, it is all there,
Yeah.
what have you, is priced at what? It's at $48 an ounce, very low.
So, yeah.
And with a major price increase in gold, 17, $20,000, that alone uh, would have a very positive effect or impact on our balance sheet. Now, with that being said, Chris, I don't know. Even when you start looking at these huge numbers, like gold going to
Mhm.
17 to 20,000, and the impact that would have, the thing is, and I think you talked about this on our previous podcast, how there's doing nothing to manage our debt and our spending, et cetera. So, it's kind of like, it reminds me of those stories you hear about lottery winners where, a person who was making 20, 30, maybe $40,000 a year now all of a sudden gets $100 million in a Powerball.
Right.
And the story, in the overwhelming percentage of those, the money is gone within literally just a few years.
Yeah. A
And
handful of years. Yeah.
yeah, and that kind of seems the same with this. Even if there was a magic fix to, you know, get rid of like some of the debt or this, that, whatever else, there's really nothing in place, or doesn't seem like anyone's focused on what we can do to actually stop the debt and, start doing things in a financially or fiscally more responsible manner.
Right. Well, and that's one of the reasons why the author here is speculating such a high gold price is because the spending, the overspending, and the lack of a budget, that's probably not going to change based on what we've seen over the last 15 or 20 years, really. And so, one thing that the government could do, and there's been a lot of speculation, and I tend to believe it, that they've manipulated and tried to hold down the gold price for a lot of years. And really, until probably the last couple of years, they've been pretty successful at it. But one of the arguments here is that now that we're in such a bad financial condition on our balance sheet with U.S. Treasuries and our debt, that one thing they could do is allow the gold price to continue to climb, and instead of holding it down, actually maybe get behind it and push it higher, so that all the gold that the U.S. holds could improve our balance sheets by jumping significantly in value. So it's a good argument. It's hard to say obviously at this point if that is going to happen or not, which is why I think $8,000 to $10,000 gold in the next couple of years is a much more conservative and maybe realistic number to look at. But if the government does get behind gold and put a little more wind into the sails, then these numbers of 17 to 20,000, 10 or 15 years from now, that might seem cheap
Sure.
at the rate that we're going. So it's going to be something obviously we continue to watch. But I think either way, whether our $4,700 gold today goes to 8,000 or 10,000 or 17 to 20, if you're holding it, you're going to be in good shape and at least protected from the financial turmoil that most families are going to be going through.
Sure. Well, and I got to tell you, I agree with what you're saying in concept or theory with, how that 17 or 20,000, dollar price for gold is aggressive or high. But then I reflect back on, like, as you and I both know, how quickly gold reached that $5,000 price. I mean,
Yeah.
it happened like it was, even us in the business really didn't necessarily see it hitting or coming that quickly. And you
Right.
could say the same thing for most markets. Look where the Dow is right now, what Bitcoin did, individual stocks, you could look at those as well. So, at the end of the day, even though these numbers seem to be so grandiose or so even inflated to the positive side, when
Yeah.
you get right down to it, and especially when you talk about gold and the universal support it gets from countries literally globally or around the world who are buying the asset, and silver for that matter, it all of a sudden becomes a much more believable number. And even, to be quite frank
Sure.
with you, Chris, it comes even a smaller number to some extent. So,
Yeah.
all right, well, Chris, if
Well,
people want to learn more about gold, how do they do that? And go ahead and finish. What
Uh,
were you going to say?
yeah, no, I was just going to say. I mean, think back to when you were starting in the business. I mean, gosh, gold was in the what $200 range,
Got in the
and at
200s, yeah.
that yeah, and at that time, thinking about $2,000 gold, seemed like a big number. It's much further away. That was much further away than where we are now, from nearly 5,000 to hitting 20,000.
Sure.
So
Well,
yeah,
remember,
it's
the previous high was to the dollar. I think was 876 during the Carter administration,
right.
and we were in the twos and threes for a long period of time. So, the $800 to $900 an ounce gold seemed like the most inconceivable thing in the world.
Right. Yep. So this is much more realistic, and I think why maybe in 5 or 10 years we'll be looking back saying maybe we were a little too conservative with these numbers.
Right. I agree. All right. So, if people want to learn more about buying gold, what can they do?
Yeah, give us a call or a text at 1-800-289-2646, or visit the website swissamerica.com. You can request information on there. You can actually even just click to dial, and it'll call us if you're on a smartphone. And just let whoever answers know that you're looking for a little more information. We'll put together a nice packet, get it off to you, either hard copies in the mail or through email, and set an appointment down the road to help you however we can.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. If you're not subscribed to our podcast, please do so. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Take care.